Also, if people want to kind of use the chat to kind of introduce yourselves, say a bit about your background, and also if anybody wants to kind of share any events that they've been involved in and things like that as well, please use the chat. We'll also have Fiona potentially joining online, but she's on a train, so it might be a bit in and out, but that's all good. Okay, so we'll get started. So thanks everybody for joining. So welcome to the 4th Women's Off-Road Cycling Community of Practice session. So we're some of you might have come to some of the other sessions, but we're putting on these webinar sessions as part of our work with Baker Cymru and MTB Wales, where we're essentially using the Fierce framework as a tool to help kind of drive women's mountain biking in Wales. We're also doing work kind of further afield as well. And so we're putting on a range of kind of webinars and activities around the 4 areas of the Fierce framework. So I'm just multitasking as we're getting people to join in. Hi Jane, nice to have you join us. We've just got started. So I'm just talking through the different activities that we've been putting on so far. So we've had a webinar around building communities of women in mountain biking. And that was a workshop that we held at Bike Park Wales, and we used the Fierce toolkit to help kind of have conversations around how to help communities of women get set up and grow and develop. We've also, so the second sort of priority area is around leadership. So we held a webinar on women's kind of demystifying ride leadership and encouraging women to take part in ride leadership qualifications. And we're also really, really pleased that we've been able to fund some women to take part in a ride leadership qualification in partnership with ProRide as well. So that's been really, really exciting to do that. The third area is around visibility and representation in mountain biking. So what we're doing at the moment is we're sharing lots of stories of women in mountain biking on our social media platforms, and to kind of share diverse stories. And we've got a webinar coming up on the 31st of July, which Nick from New Forest Off-Road Club is going to be leading. So New Forest Off-Road Club are doing lots and lots of great things in terms of inclusivity. So we're really looking forward to having her come along and do that talk. I can put links and things like that in the chat later so that you can join and register for that if you want to. And then the 4th area of the framework is around integrating women into wider mountain biking culture. And so this is where we're kind of talking about events and racing, because whilst kind of building communities of women is really important for bringing women into mountain biking, we also recognise the need to integrate women into wider mountain biking culture, and events and racing is a really important way of doing this. So and we know that mountain biking events are kind of lagging behind other sports in terms of their approach to inclusivity. So for example, kind of women are making up 10% or actually sometimes less than that in terms of entering mountain biking races. So what we want to do today is to kind of have a bit of a conversation around kind of examples and stories of what works, and what doesn't, in terms of events and races, in terms of their inclusivity. And then what we're going to do is have a follow-up event, which we're going to be kind of working with Hetty on, which is where we're going to have this follow-up event with event organisers, where we want to kind of co-create a set of guidelines that event organisers can then kind of use to help their events be more inclusive. So we've got Emily Greaves and Em Whitaker with us today, who have very, very kindly agreed to kind of share some of their examples and stories and experiences in events. And then we'll kind of open up and have a bit more of a conversation with kind of everybody else as well. So we're kind of a small group, so we can keep it quite informal as well. If people want to kind of put hands up or chip in as well, that's absolutely fine. And of course use the chat as well. So first of all, I don't mind who goes first, Em or Emily, if anyone has a preference. But if you could just kind of introduce yourself and tell us about your kind of journey into mountain biking and kind of what led you to being involved in entering races and in your case, Emily, organising events. I don't mind who wants to go first.
Go on, you go first, Emily.
Well volunteered, Emily.
My journey into mountain biking, I suppose, must have started over 20 years ago. I've always had a bike. And then I started mountain biking when I met my husband. And it has just evolved year on year. Where I live, it's just a kind of off-road paradise, I think, and it just leads you to want to mountain bike rather than road bike. And I suppose my whole journey has ended up with me. I live 2 miles from Conwy Croft in Perthshire, which is a trail centre, campsite, bunkhouse, rustic wedding venue, all sorts go on there. And I'm very lucky to have a job where I guide and coach there. In terms of racing, my first ever mountain bike race was the Strathpuffer as a quad, which is a 24-hour mountain bike race up near, well, past Inverness in winter. So it's I guess it's and that was petrifying when I first did it for lots of reasons. I have since done a couple of enduros. I do Strathpuffer every year because I absolutely love it. And I have come into organising. I used to organise the Isle of Jura Fell race. I did that for 6 years. I used to be an active schools coordinator, and within that I organised lots of small events. And whilst I've been at Conwy Croft, I've organised the Scottish Schools Mountain Bike Championships, and more recently, Clans of the Croft, which is it's a team enduro event. It ran for the first time last year, and it was organised by Aaron Gray, who is Muck Meadow Events, well known in Scotland, maybe not quite so well known in England. And he has handed that race over to Conwy Croft on the proviso that I organised it. So I've never organised an enduro before, and I am now. And I suppose last year when I was digging into all the stats from it, there were 29 women entered out of 262, which
Wow,
shocked me.
yeah.
And I'm trying to change that. Learning
Nice.
as I go. That's me in short.
Nice. Well, we'll definitely dig into kind of how things that you're doing to try and change that in a little bit later on. Thanks for that, Emily. How about you? Would you be happy to just introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your journey into mountain biking and kind of what led you to then going on to getting involved in racing?
Yeah, so I was kind of very fortunate and spent a lot of time growing up in the Alps, which just kind of led me to ask my parents if I could try mountain biking as a teenager, and they let me. And I then sort of, back in the UK, a race came up, I think it was 2010 or 2011, called Diva Descent up in Scotland. And I was like, oh, I want to give that a go. And it was a sort of coaching weekend and racing, gave that a go. It was like, oh, it wasn't really a race. It was more of a friendly race. They weren't going to do a podium. They did. And it was like, oh, that was all right. And then I started racing some like local races and was doing okay. And then it just kind of grew from there. And I was like, oh, I'll give some more national downhill races a go. And yeah, did all right for myself. But unfortunately, too many injuries caused me to not be able to race downhill anymore. And instead I focused on getting like my guiding. And now I want to get some coaching qualifications and go a bit more into that side of it.
Amazing. Thanks, Sam. And then Emily, would you be happy to tell us a bit about your kind of perhaps early experiences of racing and kind of what was that like when you first started attending events and races? What was that like?
When I But so I suppose Strathpuffer is a really stupid race to do for the first time ever, because it's 24 hours, it's in the winter, 17 hours of darkness. And I suppose what I was most nervous about was slowing people up and people coming up behind me, and I hadn't ridden the track. I was worried about the ice, the weather, like so many things. I did it in a team of 4, and we were a mixed team, 3 guys that I know really well and me, and then we knew each other really, really, really well afterwards. And actually, everything I was worried about, I didn't need to be. Everybody is so friendly. If someone's coming up behind you, they just say, oh, you know, when you've got a minute, move out of the way. There was no barging. No one was awful. I absolutely loved it. Although it's hard and it's through the night, I came away from there buzzing, and I go back every year now. So in terms of negative experience, I highly recommend everybody to go, because it is amazing. And there is a good mix of males, females, all genders there, but definitely more males, I would say. The first enduro I ever did, I think I went with friends, which is what we tend to do. I don't think I would ever enter an enduro on my own and go on my own, even now. And I'm quite brave. I just wouldn't. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. What about you? Could you tell us about your kind of early experiences of racing? What was it like when you first started?
It was very much me, and maybe because I was a teenager, I was younger, it'd very much be me and maybe 1 or 2 other racers at downhill races. And at that point, especially at national rounds, we wouldn't get a podium in any of our categories because there just weren't enough of us. And then they changed it to, well, if there's enough under 18s, we'll give under 18 women a category. But that still meant if you were 16, you might be racing against an 18-year-old, or it meant you were 16 racing against the expert racers. Okay. And you were constantly comparing yourself to them and being like, oh, it's not fair. Or at national rounds, you just wouldn't get any recognition whatsoever. And on all the race reports, it's a lot different now. This was like 14, 15 years ago. There'd be no recognition in the race reports. They wouldn't even mention the junior or youth women in it or anything. And you were just kind of part of it without being part of it. It didn't matter if you were there or not. But yeah, it's gotten a lot better now.
And why do you think that is? Is that because there wasn't enough kind of women riding at that time, or sort of what's changed now, and why do you think that it was like that at the time?
I think it was a mix of there wasn't enough funding for the race organisers to give separate podium and separate everything, and then also there wasn't enough of us to do it. But I remember some races some national rounds where there'd be 3 junior women and junior men would get a podium with champagne and all that, and the junior women wouldn't get anything. So yeah, it was, yeah.
Yeah, that recognition is really, really important, isn't it?
Yeah, massively, because it means that up and coming riders get seen and get heard about, and you don't have to fight. But yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Em. And Emily, can you tell us a bit about kind of sort of why you wanted to take part in events? And this could also be related to organising events as well. And kind of what are some of the benefits from taking part in events, and what you've gained from those experiences?
I suppose any event, it's just nice to have something to aim for and something to train for. And events have a buzz around them. You can go with your friends. I don't do particularly well at mountain biking events, but when I go to Strathpuffer, I go because of the team aspect. Like we've built a team. There's a team that supports you, and it's not really an individual effort. And for me, I absolutely love that. If I do an event on my own, which I do every so often, that's a personal challenge, and I get something from that because I like to have a challenge. I like to push myself. I like to have something to aim for. But again, I suppose as a working mum, it's difficult to fit in training, and it has to be an agreement with the family if I'm going to be doing something like that. That's always a bit of a challenge. But I always, well, and it's whether that, you know, it's mountain bike events and other events that I do as well. But you definitely, I'm always disappointed, and I was really disappointed last year because I entered Clans of the Croft. It's with although I have to say, like, I thought we could do a family clan, as I have, like, I've got Andy, my husband, I've got Harris is my son, and Jasmine, and we all ride bikes, although Jasmine is refusing to ride bikes at the moment, even though she's been brought up and was on a balance bike at 2 and can ride better than the rest of us. She refused to be in a clan, and I think that is some of the deep-rooted society, whatever that goes on. You know, she's had me as a role model. She's had everything, the best that you would think. You've done everything right, and now she won't ride a bike. I don't quite know, but that might be her rebellion against me. I'm not sure. But,
do you mind me asking how old she is?
She's 16.
Okay.
That age.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's quite interesting. We've been talking about the kind of teenage age and how to keep them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that said, she will go to Strathpuffer. So
Okay.
I don't know what that says.
And could you tell us about perhaps what you've gained from racing and some of the benefits and what were those experiences like and what you gained from them?
I definitely met a lot of good people, which I rode with a lot of really good people, met a lot of good people. It definitely, for me, improved my riding a long way. And then you'd see the same people at races, and after a while you'd get to know them, and it became easier and easier to go to these races. And if you were by yourself, just get on the uplift and you'd be chatting to people, and they'd be like, oh, come do some runs with us, or come check out this section, are you struggling on anything? And that sort of community aspect was huge, like, after a while. And because it's such a small community, it was downhill back then, you really got to know everyone, and yeah, it was pretty great.
Yeah, amazing. It's quite interesting that for both of you, it sounds like the kind of team element and the community element is a really big part of why you've been involved in events and racing. And could you tell us a bit about kind of perhaps an example that you could draw on where an event has felt particularly inclusive or welcoming? Have you come across any kind of examples of particularly good practice?
I'd definitely say that first event I ever did, Diva Descent, was really good, and it was ahead of its time. It was just the whole coaching aspect of it, and I guess events like the Hope Women's Enduro had taken on that, and just grown arms and legs. And then I was actually a part of, I didn't ride it, but I was a part of the Bristol Rally for work last year, and again, that was another really great, not necessarily mountain biking, but just a really great welcoming community space where everyone was just, riding bikes. It's not that deep.
Yeah. And what sort of makes the Divas Descent, Bristol Rally, Hope Enduro, what kind of makes these events feel more inclusive than others, do you think?
I think it's a communication from the get-go. The way they describe the events, the way they outline what they are, they're very clear. It's very obvious what it is and what you're getting involved in. There's sort of very little second guessing or very little questioning, and if you do have questions, you feel like you can just ask. And you always see in the comments or anything like that, people going, oh, I'm going alone, will anybody else be going alone, things like that. So it instantly feels very welcoming. Yeah,
and actually having an opportunity then to kind of build connections before the event even starts, so you can kind of virtually get to know people before you've met. That's really good. And people that you might have met at previous events, you can see who's going, and that might help encourage you to get. Okay, excellent. Emily, what about you? Are there any kind of examples that have felt particularly inclusive or welcoming, perhaps events that you've organised that you think has been a really good example, or any that you've been to yourself?
I suppose it's more the festivals. So I've been part of the Dirt Divas festivals. And again, as Em said, it is communication, and I think, you know, that rally format really lends itself. It's such a great format. And Claire, who I know but not very well, I'm looking at all her communication, and it's welcoming, it's great, and I'm taken them from, and also I wonder if there's a competitive element. If you go to a race and there's a competitive element, which is also really important to have competition, but as soon as there is competition, there are nerves, and there is, you know, you potentially are on your own, and you know that, so it's the language around that. But language is so important. So I did the Highland Trail 550 last year, which is like a long self-supported bikepacking race. It wasn't a race for me. It was more of a challenge. So Alan Goldsmith organizes that, and the year I did it, he actively went for a 50-50 male-female split. Now I know he could have filled that race 10 times over with men, and really struggled to get that 50-50 split on the start line. But for me, it's amazing that a man is doing that. And I know he got quite a lot of grief off men, that he was letting women, you know, persuading women to join it where there was men waiting to be, you know, that's you know, that's brave in a way. And it's amazing that he's doing that rather than a woman, actually. And standing on that start line, I have never, you know, you're looking around, and it was amazing to be on that start line and see the mix, because normally you stand on the start line and there's one or two others. So it's, I would like, it must be, there is the nature of the event and communication, I think.
I was going to say, Maria, I think it's that intention from the start that this is what I want at my event. As a race organizer, you have to have an intention of who you are wanting at your event, and what, like you're saying, Emily, like a number that you're going for. And the trouble is, so many event organizers have no idea what the percentage of women is at their events, and they have no inclination to even set themselves a target or improve on what they had last year. And I've spoken to before with race organisers about saying, can you put tickets aside for women, so that because inevitably women will want to wait for their friends to join, or to sort out childcare, to, you know, they're often not on that wait line, you know, 7 months before an event to book it, because of all the juggling that women typically do, being the main carers typically, and a lot of them won't do it because it requires them to do something extra. It requires them to do some work, and they don't need to if they're going to sell out anyway. That's the view, that's the sort of attitude I've had back from race organisers. It's sort of been, well, you know, and that's the problem. You know, it's the same, my daughter does the Pierce races, and I did one last year. You know, they sell out every year. So if you want to get ahead of that, you need to be booking them in January. You can't get on partway through the year, and they don't necessarily prioritise women. So if a woman drops out, they don't necessarily say, right, well, I'm going to give that spot to another woman so that we can try and maintain our ratio. And at that race, you were saying, Em, with about the categories, they have an entire girls category. They have 3 women's categories, 8 male categories. You know, and so you've got 13-year-old girls racing 17, 18-year-old girls. You've got 19 plus. There's no 45, there's no 40 plus, there's no, so me as an older woman, it's not I'm not going to waste my money entering an event like that, because it's just not, it's not motivating, it's not worth it. But at the event I raced at, it was amazing. The women were so welcoming. You know, I found it massively intimidating. You get on the uplift, it's just men everywhere. You know, we're lucky if so I looked at all these stats. It's really interesting, Maria. You can easily go onto Roots and Rain, which is where all the race results go. And you can go into every event and you can click gender at the top. It's really easy. And I did it maybe a year or 2 ago. across a lot of events, and most of the time you were lucky if it was 8%. The only events that had high women's uptake were typically women's events. So like the Hope Enduros, for example. And it's just knowing that there's going to be other women at these events. You know, it's really intimidating going when there's 300 people and maybe 15 of them are going to be women. And it's really hard. And you were saying, you know, it's so important that these girls, young girls and older women, are being recognised at these events. And you're like saying, you don't get podiums. And the only one at the Pierce is elite women, 13 to 18 and 19 plus.
I used to race the Pierce, and when I started, that would have been back in 2014. They had all of the categories for women, and they'd always done it with all of the category splits, and only with ever one or two. In the end, we asked to have it joined up, to put them together to make it better, because it's no good standing on a podium on your own. You've turned up, you've won. Just
but it's not your fault.
Then you don't try. And it was the same across all. So they decided to try it, and then they split it at I think 18 upwards. I mean, I didn't start racing then till I didn't start riding a bike till I was 43, and that's when I started racing straight into the Pierce. But your age doesn't always work against you, because even in that category, I was still beating the younger girls.
Yeah, no, and I think that's fair enough. I just feel it's a real shame, because it's not your fault or the girls' fault that there's not more women at these events.
And
it's changed at some other events now, because if you look at the Forest of Dean, when I started back there in 2013, there was only one category, and this is at the minis. This isn't regional or national. This is just mini entry-level racing. Whereas they didn't even have an under 18s, but you'd only get the odd 15 or 16-year-old. I think at the time it was Mayor Atkinson was about the only young girl there. Whereas if you look now, after the mini fodders and what they're doing down there, the young girls that are entering, and they do split all the classes out, it is growing massively in that particular area, just because of the clubs and stuff that are going on.
But that's it. But it's coming from an intentional background. Do you know what I mean? It's like there's a reason why those numbers are increasing at that particular event, but very much an event organizer needs to come with the intention of, I'm going to have separate categories, I'm going to do more to get women at these events, because it's not my fault that there's not more women doing those events. Why should I be penalized
to be
in
to
those
be
categories?
Able to then have more categories in the first
So I do think one thing that some organizers could look at is to hold back tickets for underrepresented groups, whatever you decide that might be, to encourage those numbers.
Used to do that on their entry. They used to allocate so many per category.
Yeah, they
but
don't
obviously
now.
You'd have to use it by a certain date. But that was back again to 15, to 14, to 15, to 16, when the whole series would sell out within minutes. You had to go to the shop the day that they went live in January or February, and you all queued up and you booked on for the whole series. Where over recent years, they're not selling out quite. It's event by event now. Not all of them are selling out.
They sold out for this year, because I booked May on in January, and you can't get onto any of them for the rest of the year. So again, if you suddenly decide partway through the year that you want to maybe try one of these races, you can't. So you can't. You've got to wait until January to then get on.
This is really, really helpful, actually. I think around the conversation around categorization, and also around holding tickets back and things like that. So that's really, really important.
On these bigger events, where it is, they do sell out, and you know that there's only going to be, there could be 1,000 men trying to get in and 100 women, and obviously the percentage that do get in, if they do sell out within minutes, the chance of women getting through on that ballot is slim. So they should hold something back, or
aim, like Emily said,
but they have to be
50-50.
But if they're not, if they don't buy them within that first 24 hours, they get thrown back in. They've got the same chance as everybody else. You can't hold them forever. But obviously, if it does sell out within minutes, which some of these events do, then they should allow some a few hours to be able to have a go at getting on.
Excellent.
I think
Okay,
for me, Maria, it comes from that intention of an event organizer of going, I want to encourage more women at my events.
Yeah,
and
like you
I
say,
think
that
there are some that just don't have any interest in increasing women at their events, and they don't understand why they might want more women at these events. But what I've found, and a lot of guys will say it, is it just brings that bro culture down slightly, and actually you find that there's you have a slightly different vibe. And I think some of the race organizers need to understand why it's beneficial for them to have more women, not just to be told, oh, you've got to have more women at your events. And I think it's up to them as a race organizer to decide, okay, so last year you had 10% women at your event. What are you aiming for this year? Are you aiming for flat? Are you aiming to increase it? Just so that they even have an awareness, because I think there are many that don't have an awareness. The other thing I would
sorry, go on.
Sorry, Maria. The other thing I'd say is I've worked with Scott at the Southern Enduro a fair bit on things, and having lots of video clips of the runs are really helpful, because women like to know, like, what am I getting myself into? What does it look like? I will always go and look on YouTube. You know, before Bucknell, I was like, right, let me watch Bucknell. Am I going to be able to race this? You know, and the Hope Enduro is brilliant. They've already got on their website before you booking the tickets, like, these are the tracks. It's a really long video, but you can speed things up, talking through everything, you know, multiple angles of the drops. And the trouble is, a lot of race organizers will do things for one race or a couple of races, and it actually just takes time and momentum. So I think it's really hard for them. They expect to see instant results from something they've implemented, and then it doesn't happen because it takes a while. But the local enduro here, the first year that they ran it, I helped run a women's group here in Surrey, and there was a huge thing of loads of our Girls Alive lot did it, and it was brilliant because it bumped the numbers up hugely in terms of their women's attendance. But they only all did it because they got FOMO, and it was like, oh, well, you're entering it, I'm going to enter it. And it was, they didn't even know what they were getting themselves into, most of them, and they had a great time, but they didn't feel the need to do it again next year. So they loads of them did it for 1 year, but they were like, nah, I've done it now, I don't need to do it again, you know. But having that community aspect that both Emily and Em have talked about, I think is really, really important. And I've certainly found, I'd heard about another race organizer that was doing, you know, the first half an hour of practice was women only or girls only, you know, which I think is really valid. I've certainly found practice really intimidating, because you would just go down and you would have God knows who coming behind you, flying past you, and it's quite intimidating. So to know that you weren't going to have that would be quite nice. And it doesn't necessarily maybe have to be women's only, but maybe a slightly slower paced practice would be, again, more inclusive, because I think whenever we're talking about inclusivity, it's always important to think about that it actually welcomes more people in, not just the women. It's about the other people that might not be so confident, or might also feel intimidated in these environments. You know, whether they were, you know, it was always great in the uplift truck when it was more women than men in the uplift truck. And you know, May's mentioned before in the uplift truck of, you know, all the man spreading, and she's little, like, stuck in the corner of the uplift truck. You know, there's all of that, and so just some of the language and the conversations that go on, and they just don't even realize it's a girl next to them, because they're so used to it being male heavy and male orientated. And so again, from a race organizer's point of view, like, just ensuring that their media coverage shows enough women, because if you go to, I don't know, the Pierce Race, you know, Instagram, you know, how far do you have to look down to see a woman on their first post? You know, because again, that's what you're going to look at as a woman. So as a race organizer, you've got to be doing that slight positive discrimination of going, right, I want more women at my event, I need it to look welcoming to women, therefore I need to show women. But unless you're doing it intentionally, you know, as a race organizer, you're looking at the photos. If you've got 10 women out of 300, you're going to struggle to find those pictures. You know, and it's the same for the photographers at the event. They all share photos from an event, and they'll show the best photos. Well, you'll scroll through and it'll all be men. You know, I had it at an event, I stood there marshalling, I said, oh yeah, my eldest is racing, and a guy was like, oh, what category is he in? She's in the girls category, you know. And it's not that they just don't have that awareness of it, because it's not their lived experience, it's not their experience of racing. You know, Brendan Fairclough was at the Pierce race, and my daughter races with him, and he had to ask me, oh, what category is May in? I said, well, there isn't a girls, it's just girls. He's like, oh, is there not junior and youth and juvenile? I was like, no. And he was like, because they had no concept that there were this few women at these sorts of events, you know. And it's actually starting by raising that awareness of it, of going, you know, what are the numbers? what we're starting with and what we're trying to achieve it. And I don't know that it's even, you can't even be talking about 50-50, Emily. I think that's amazing that he went to that effort to get 50-50. I can only imagine how much hard that work was. But even to get it to 10% or 15% would be amazing.
Yeah, I think lots of food for thought there around kind of raising awareness in the first place, media coverage, and holding back tickets. Lots of ideas. So I'll go back to Em, if that's okay, just, and then we'll kind of have a wider discussion in a few minutes. Em, if you could sort of share with us perhaps some experiences, or if there's a particularly memorable experience that you've had at an event that maybe wasn't so welcoming. So we've talked a little bit about examples that are really good and that are welcoming. Have you got any examples that you can reflect on that maybe wasn't so welcoming with events? There might be a few from the sounds of the conversation.
Yeah, quite a lot. And it is quite interesting, so what you're saying about the category of 13 to 18, because I think that's the most important category of where they need to be split up. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to be making a living from it if they want to. And if you're 13 racing against an 18-year-old, it's really soul destroying. But yeah, and that is probably the worst, not the worst experience I had, but that was something that I really struggled with when I was racing. Was I'd be 15, 16, comparing myself to people that were in their 20s and people that race professionally now. And I'd be like, oh, I just can't beat them. I'm getting close, but I just can't beat them. And it would be really soul destroying that you just get so frustrated. And it's like, no, you have to sit down and go to yourself like, no, I'm still a child. That's the reason I'm not beating, and that's the reason I'm feel so far behind. So I think splitting the categories out for under 18s makes such a big difference, and it also gives recognition to these up and coming riders that are realistically the ones trying to make a living from it and the ones that are going to try to become pro racers. If they don't have that from straight off, then they're going to constantly just be getting bashed down.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Emily,
having raced for over 10 years, you see different people try different things, and some event organisers have tried and they probably get it thrown back at them as well a bit, and then or somebody offers to do something, then doesn't do it, and then somebody else comes in. But you've seen different things where they have tried. Maybe they could have done a lot better, but they have made some effort to try and encourage women. As I've spoken to you before, Maria, like with, say, the mini downhills at Forest of Dean, where he was getting Chris was getting Katie Kerr to do track walks for the women and turn up. And we were getting also through Lauren Jenkins, we were then again from Chris getting to know what the track was the week in advance. So the guys wouldn't know until after the weekend before the event, where the women would know before, so we could go down and practice. There's been different things at different ones, but they tail off, and that's just whoever was arranging it at the time doesn't race anymore, doesn't do it anymore, and then they get left without, sort of thing. So some of them, they have tried, and again at nationals doing track walks with Rachel Atherton, she's put them on, taking time out of her practice to walk tracks and do things with all the females.
And I suppose it sounds like with things like track walks and lead laps and things like that, which sounds really, really good examples of good practice, but it sounds like it's kind of relying on people sort of giving up their time and volunteering to do it. And
it's easy enough on something like a downhill race, it's one track, but when you start talking enduros, when there's 4, 5, 8 or even 10 tracks that you've got to learn, you can't do it on the race weekend. There just isn't the time there to do it. They'd have to let you know what things are the week before to be able to do something like that.
And then so Emily, as somebody who kind of organises events, sort of can you tell us about kind of what you've been doing to maybe try and foster inclusion with the events that you've been organising, and perhaps some of the challenges that you've come up against with that?
Yes, so I trawled the media from Clans of the Croft last year, the enduro that I'm doing, and I could barely find a picture of a female.
Okay.
So straight away, everything that's available, there were no pictures on Route and Rain. So what was available to me was poor.
Okay.
All the YouTube clips or videos that people had made were very lads. Now, it's not that I don't like, those people are going to come no matter what marketing you put out. And so the challenge is money, because you need money. I needed money to do a filming day. So I did a filming day, and Graham actually came along, and I made sure, well, I luckily I got funding, because actually I'm feeling a little bit jealous of all the events down south, because at the moment there's only 20 people entered Clans of the Croft. It's not going to sell out, and I don't need to ring fence any for anyone because I'm trying to, you know, but it's in October, it's different. But I got funding to create, like, specifically to market to women and other genders, just to try and make an inclusive, like, the vibe and a fun vibe, because this event for me, yes, there's a competitive element, but there's more, like, racing with your friends as a 3 in a team. Like, I'd never done it. It was so much fun. And it's like, well, straight away, if you could get a team of 3, there's your safety net. You know who you're with. You're going to be with them all day, and you'll be racing together. So I deliberately had, like, well, Amy Kenyon was part of the Developing Mountain Biking in Scotland, had a fresh cuts, which was it was a program where they were creating new filmmakers for mountain biking.
Hey.
Amy was the only female graduate, so I got in touch with her, and she was available to make the film. So straight away I'm thinking, right, brilliant, you know, she's free. And then I've had people of all ages as well, because I didn't just want young shredders. So we have some older grey-haired folk in the films, and young, and we've got mixed teams, mixed genders, women's, all of it. And we had this filming day and I basically gave Amy the brief of that I wanted it, you know, to look fun, look inclusive, and she absolutely nailed it. But obviously stuff like that's expensive. And I had a photographer as well, so now I've got tons of media and it all looks brilliant, but that's expensive. And then I've got a PR company to put it out as well, so that's expensive.
And how did you source? Was that funding through dim bins then? How did you source that?
I applied to Event Scotland, their national events program. And that, you know, and again, that is time and effort. Like it was it's a huge amount of time to do the funding application. Didn't even know, you know, then you don't know that you're going to get it. And then you just think, well, what can I cobble together on an iPhone? If I don't get that, you know, it's not the same, because what Amy's created is brilliant, but then you've got to get it seen by people and get the press releases out, and so it's like really intentional, but a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of effort that nobody sees. It's a completely thankless task in a way, you know, as a race organizer, but you have to do that, and then it's using all your networks and everything to try and put across these messages.
And I suppose that sort of goes back to what Zoe was saying around, kind of, for somebody like you really care about this cause, and so it's something that you're willing to put the time and effort into, whereas perhaps other event organisers might take some convincing to put that time in. So and then Em, would you be happy to kind of share any thoughts that you've got around what could be done to help make events a bit more inclusive? So that could be things that we've already drawn on, or maybe any other ideas that you've got.
Yeah, I think communication is the first one is really key, and then what we're talking about, showing what the course is like, if they can, what features there are, especially if it's like a race where it's going to be people's first race or first event, just being really open and honest that this is everything that you're going to come across. Lay it all out on the table. Any questions you can always ask us. Here is everything you need to know. I think that is key. Just lay everything out on the table.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. And Emily, any other thoughts from you around what could be done to make events more inclusive? And then we'll have a wider discussion with the group.
You also need your champions as well, and you need the word of mouth. So it's also, when the event happens, you have to somehow create the right vibe, like if you go to an event, like, so I go to Stuff Buffer, I love it, but I also went to the Kielder Chiller, which was a very similar event. Didn't like it, the vibe wasn't nice. I remember, and actually at that point I was doing pretty well, and I had someone trying to pass me on a black descent, which you couldn't, but the man behind me literally expected me to stop and let him pass. Wow. But he was in a racing quad, and I was actually winning the women's solos. And yet, but it's a different, and so the vibe there was awful, and I wouldn't go back. So I've got to try as a race organizer to create that, so when people do come to the event, they're going to enjoy it, have a great time, tell their friends, and want to come back. So it's putting that into that vibe, into the volunteers and the people that work there, and creating, I want the marshals to be cheering everybody rather than the marshals standing there, but doing nothing and maybe not saying to, it's all of it, but it takes a lot of energy, a lot of work, a lot of, also, I know that I need to go out and do, Comicroft does have a reputation for being on the more technical side of the grading, and I know that because a lot of the like 2 of the stages use the blacks, that put people off. So I've now created a light version which just has the blue and the red grading, and people will be able to, whoever enters that, they can do that as many times as they want, but there isn't enough time. If you did the full thing, you couldn't do that as many times as you want. But I need to go out and make good videos to show people probably the crux points, maybe not the whole thing, but the crux features on each of them. Should maybe show you the lines, show you how to ride them, like as Em was saying, because I don't have that yet. But again, I need to find time to do that right and to do that well. We're going to do, because on the day and the weekend and the way it is and where we are, because it's rural, there's no time for practice. And if people are traveling, they're not going to travel, 2 weekends in a row. But we are, for anybody that is local-ish, we're going to have coaching days like a month before, over a weekend, for the light and the full courses, to help people and show them the lines and all the rest of it. And I've managed to get that sponsored by Deviate Cycles. So if you've entered the race, you can come along to the free coaching day and sign up for that. Because obviously going to events is money, and because we're rural, you've got to travel. It's all money, and people have less and less of that money these days. So actually, also us being rural is a barrier to people.
That's quite interesting. As well. But having those coaching days must be really, really helpful for people, particularly who are new to entering events, to kind of help them become familiar with the features and the course before racing it. So I think, Lindsay, that we were talking about that yesterday, weren't we? Yeah. Okay, well, thanks everybody. If we could sort of open up to everyone for a bit of a discussion around kind of what do you think could help more women and marginalised genders and other kind of underrepresented groups enter more mountain biking events? What do people think, and sort of what could help them to feel more inclusive, and perhaps some of the barriers as well? If we can just have a bit of a discussion, what do people think? I know sort of Zoe, you were talking about the experience for May, your daughter. What's that like for her, kind of entering events where it's kind of, you were talking about that kind of bro culture. Have you got any kind of thoughts around how to her experiences that you'd want to share?
I think she's just used to it, that's just how it is. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting one. She doesn't get intimidated really. She's good friends with a lot of the lads that race. But yeah, there's certainly been things where, you know, you're queuing to get onto the track for practice and there's a guy just having a wee, you know, next to the tree over there, and you know, there's things like that where, well, there isn't anywhere, you know, you've got to go a bit further as a woman to try and go for a wee in the woods, or you know, there's that sort of thing. The race and the peers they're really good in that they actually employ a lot of women. A lot of them, you know, a lot of the people that work for them are women. You've got it's always Karen on the uplift. She's always chatty, and you know, is always really lovely with the girls. Yeah, I don't know, it's really a really interesting one for us as a family. It's a lot about trying to juggle everyone's priorities and the money, and you know, where do we put that, and I'd love to do more racing, but we just can't afford it, and I tend to put the money into her. And it's not just about the race entry, it's the cost of getting there, it's the cost of the accommodation. And I think, you know, you were talking about doing nationals and stuff, they're just out of our reach. It's just so expensive. You could probably spend £10,000 trying to get, you know, we were talking about going up to the national champs, and one of the reasons for that is because the national champs have specific categories. So I could enter the old lady category, you know, that I wouldn't have many other events, but that's in Fort William. And whilst the race entry is sort of £105, you've then got fuel, you've got the car, you know, the van, where are we going to stay, you've got food, you know, it's not always as simple as it's just the race entry is the barrier in terms of the cost. I think it's all the other stuff. And Emily, we'd love to come to your event at Conwy Croft. We have stayed there. We stayed there years ago. It was one of May's first riding experiences. We went to a wedding up in Edinburgh and then carried on and went to Conwy Croft, and it was brilliant and we loved it. But again, for us in the south, we can get to the Morzine quicker, unfortunately. And that's the nature of it. I think it's you sort of, we've stuck with a lot of local events because, you know, on a Sunday you've got to be there at sort of 7:30, 8 o'clock, especially if I'm marshalling, which is something I do that helps contribute to the money side. I tend to marshal the races, which really helps, and also it gets you inside slightly with the race organisers, and I would always talk to everybody when I'm marshalling about the fact that it's my daughter that races and the numbers. I'll always be very vocal about it, just because people don't know what they don't know. And that's not their lived experience, and so I will happily talk about ours. You know, and it can be quite complicated, I think, as to how it can move. And I think things have improved. I think if you were to look over Roots and Rain over a number of years, but I think it has got to a place where it's a bit stagnated. And I think the money thing is a huge issue. You know, race organisers don't have very much. And I think, Emily, what's been great is obviously the funding that you've been able to get, which is helping do that. I think might be key for race organisers, because it's, for me, it's thinking about what is in it for them. What is in it for them as race organisers? What is it in it for people that are going? Why do we want more women at these events? Because a lot of people don't really understand why that's important. You know, and race organisers, unless it's hitting them directly in their pocket, they're not, you know, fundamentally at the end of the day, they've got to make money. Some of these things are really hard to make money at. That's why lots of race events have folded over the last few years, because people, you know, I think also the weather's an element. I think people don't want to gamble so far ahead for an event if it's going to be a washout, you know, and you've paid £100 to go somewhere. But thinking about races that May's doing and things that she wants to do, you know, actually she was like, oh, can I do the national at Revs? Because she's ridden at Revs, so it's somewhere that she understands and has been and can see, oh, I can go there, you know, whereas she's not been to some of the other places, to be like, well, I don't know if that's above my level or not my level. And speaking to some of the other girls that might have raced, she's got, you know, she's really lucky in that at the last national we knew every single girl that had podiumed. It's not a very big group of people, so it's amazing. And they're all the women that do these events are wonderful. Jess Stone particularly has been really supportive and great with the girls and running. She's run some amazing things recently at FOD with Katie Caird, and that was with the support of Mudhugger. she decided to use her sponsorship money. Instead of taking that sponsorship money from Mudhugger, she decided to put it to some coaching for some girls. Last year she split it between 4 girls to give them £250 each to go towards their race entry fees or whatever they wanted, and my daughter was lucky enough to win that £250 last year. And instead this year she wanted to reach more girls, so she said, instead of giving 4 girls some money, I want to organise a day, and she got 7 girls together. And it was brilliant. Mudhugger were amazing. They put together packages for all the girls. They even the videographer had given each of the girls a separate video edit for each of them, just their own little edit. You know, and that was amazing. It got picked up by Pink Bike, and you know, it was on the front of their you know, the search thingy that day or whatever. And it's that sort of thing. It's like Jess has decided that's what she wants to do to bring the next generation on, and she's got her sponsors on board with it. And I think so that's how you use your influence, you know.
And it sounds like there's something around that sort of like you know, personalities and influences, but also kind of sponsorship and brands, as they're kind of the responsibility on some brands to be able to kind of do some things around funding of events and promotion for events to help them become more inclusive. Has anyone got any kind of thoughts around that or any experience with that? Emily, I don't know if that's something that you've kind of had experience with. Have brands been able to help with event organising at all, or any support at all?
Brands are having their own challenges. One very interesting thing is that we have Stogies up here, which is a clothing brand, and they're sponsoring, but not very much. And they would like to run balance bike events and races in the evening. And I'm like, we've got money to have a ceilidh because it's a Scottish and the Scottish theme. And and one of their replies to me when I said we're having a ceilidh, they were like, well, I think you're wrong. I think a ceilidh's not very good because it's basically going to be a bunch of lads and their mates. And I was like, right, okay, they just don't get it. But that comment and everything just totally turned me off, because actually what they're sponsoring, when I said all sponsors can then have a race team, is not even going to cover the price of their race team. So I'm like, when you give me a lot of money, maybe you can, and then they're expecting me to start promoting their little races they want to do in the evening. But again, that's not really getting, actually my mental load doing the full race is enough. If they want to do that, I'll find them a space, it's fine, but that is all I'm doing. Deviate cycles have been brilliant. I have got High Bike. They are actually going to give an electric bike as a prize, but in terms of helping and promotion, it's more just they'll share stuff on social media and that'll be it. You know, there's the doing is me, but brands will share and share on, but they won't put any more work or effort into it, if you see what I mean. But with some of the brands I've asked, you know, when they put race teams in, it will all be males. And I've said, well, actually, can the Deviate one be either mixed gender or women, please, for your team, rather than don't, you know, and it would be good to have, you know, I don't know, but it's a challenge, actually, with brands, I found.
Okay,
some of them.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts from anybody else around kind of perhaps what changes you would want to see in events to help them become more inclusive, or any experiences that anybody would want to share?
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to ask a question. So I'm really out of your group. I'm from Romania. I heard about this meeting on a WhatsApp group, but I'm really interested in the subject, and I thought it's a good way for me to try to introduce some of your ideas in my country, because I'm racing for 15 years and I really want to start some program to help women into racing. And Zoe was saying that the organizers have to understand why they would benefit from having women into more women in the races. And I would really love to have like your opinion on what these advantages are, so I can maybe try to put up a plan, you know, explaining people why this is it. Because for me, it's not really easy to have like a discussion with the organizers and say, you know, it's good for you to have more women, but why? Why is it better?
Yeah. Does anybody have any thoughts, Zoe or Emily or anyone? Does anyone want to answer?
Because society is made up of all of us. So why can't races be a reflection of society, you know, really?
I would also say as well that, like, certainly within mountain biking, and you know, women is a massively untapped market in terms of, you know, there is a lot of money there, and you can't keep selling bikes to the same people. And fundamentally, you know, I remember this from reframing MTB. You know, this guy was sat at the table, he went, we just want to sell bikes. I'm like, well, you're not going to sell bikes if you keep just sticking out videos of Matt Jones. When was the last time you saw a video of, you know, a middle-aged woman going down a track relatively, you know, not at fast pace? And, you know, actually what's leading us to where we're at is the fact that the brands have sort of been leading the marketing in that way. And I think it's to change that story. I think that's why it's great, Emily, the work you're doing with Amy, and you're changing that story. Do you know what I mean? About putting that out there, and things like what Sisters in the Wild do with their bike packing trips. You know, I've just seen one of my amazing riders I ride with, Heather. You know, she's in her mid-60s, and she's doing that with Rachel Walker, and just changing the narrative around kind of what MTB racing can be. It doesn't have to be that box of what we maybe think it is, you know. It's not all about willy waving. It's not, you know, because it feels very much that sometimes when you turn up at these events, it's just this
and if you only promote that, then you will not get the women. So no, then you go round and round in circles.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I don't think there's any solid research on this, Maria. It'd be really interesting to know, but like I've definitely heard people say at events, you know, when you have women there, everything's a little bit like not calmer, but just less like, you know, macho. I can't think of a really good way to describe it, but just there's less swearing, there's less like just less aggression. It's not to say that women aren't competitive, but I think women are competitive in a different way. And or overall, you know, a lot of the girls will talk through their line choices together because they're all looking together, and it's not like, oh, I'm not going to tell you what my line is because I don't want you to take my line. It's like we're all in it together and we all want to get down the track and all have great times, and we can do that on our own merit. Whereas the men, it's like, oh, sneaky line, don't show anyone this, we're not going to do this line till it's our race run because we don't want anyone to do that line, you know. There's that kind of, and for me it was like, I'm not even looking at the lines, I just want to get down the track, mate. Like I've just got to get down it. Yeah. And I think it's realizing that, you know, you can be racing, but it doesn't have to be about like elbows out and I don't know. But I think that's definitely what I've had other race organisers say, that just it changes the vibe, and it's really hard to quantify that vibe. And I know we talked about that, didn't we, Maria, in Project Fierce, like the vibe on a women's ride and how that translates. And my husband and son came on the International Women's Day ride this year with us and with YT, and he was like, oh my god, I've never been on a ride like this is crazy, like all the whooping and the cheering and he's like, it's just so different. And although you will want to go fast as well, it's in a different way. So I don't know, it's really hard to quantify, but I think for race organisers, it's trying to get them to understand why it is important, and it's important in terms of just equality. But at the end of the day, it's about money. And I just think if you're opening up your races to different people, you know,
it's only going to get bigger.
It's only going to get bigger and open up that possibility. But yeah, I don't know, it's a really hard one for sure to quantify. How do we get them to understand it in that way?
Yeah. So it's almost like there's the business need for it, but there's also the kind of the doing some social good as an event, and then also the kind of the culture is it will actually improve the culture of the event, and that community feel and the kind of supportive nature of the event as well. So it's like those three different kind of areas.
I think as well that women are often very values driven when it comes to their purchasing or their like signing up to an event, if you think of that as like a purchase. And if they have a really positive experience, they're more likely to come back and bring more of their community. something I found so many things really interesting in this discussion, mainly because relatively recently I did a big survey of about 2,500 different riders, all that counted themselves as underrepresented in different ways, whether that was, you know, gender, physical ability, looked at a whole host of different things. And within female mountain bikers, just something that's maybe interesting to this discussion is the motivation for taking part in events was predominantly people and connection. It was to have that that experience connecting with other people and that sense of belonging. That's not to say that competition didn't feature. I think it was quite a bit lower down. The second on the list was personal challenge. That was kind of the second biggest motivator. And then the other thing that was interesting to hear is that the number one barrier that people mentioned was cost. And it was kind of cost in that wider sense of not just like the entry fee. It was, you know, servicing the bike. It was a lot, you know, it was the whole picture. Yeah. But behind that was kind of the mental barriers and the atmosphere. That was kind of also coming up as a hard barrier. And these are things we looked at in the survey. We looked at stuff that was hard barriers. So that's like stopping you dead. You know, you're not going to enter, you're going no further. And then also we looked at friction points. So things that just make it harder. And the problem with friction points is if you have enough friction points, you eventually stop and slow all the momentum. And then you end up with someone that's kind of ground to a halt, not because of one thing, but because of many small things. And so many, there's been so much in this discussion that's really resonated with what kind of the data that I've got says. And yeah, I just wanted to kind of touch on those ones about competition and then also cost. But then within the what we can do side of things, one of the big things people talked about, and it was one of the top things people talked about, was that communication. And how important that was. You know, knowing, I think you said it perfectly, it was about knowing what you signed up for, what you're doing, and who you can ask if you've got a question. It sounds super basic, but so many things could be solved or helped by better communication, including, like, you know, categories was a really big and really complicated discussion within the survey. But part of the issue was a lack of communication around the decision, explaining why the decision had been made, because often it's come from like a relatively, like, you know, there are exceptions, but it's come from a place of thought or logic or opinion.
Yeah.
But there's often never a kind of a little explanation that's like, we're doing this because, it's just like, we're having these categories. And that was like a really big point of like people saying they're much more open-minded to understanding something if they have the reasoning why. Sorry, that was a bit all over the place. I got excited. I enjoyed listening to everyone's discussions.
Yeah, no, super helpful. Thank you, Hetty. Anyone else? Any thoughts? Kate, did you want to come in at all with any thoughts? No pressure if you don't want to. Just want to make sure everyone's had some time.
I was thinking about things that have encouraged me to take part in events, and on Saturday I went to the Women's Takeover Day at Forest of Dean, which I think was such a great idea because obviously the enduro was there, and I think it had like social rides, so you could meet people who were potentially doing the event, so connecting with people who might be doing it. You could see the trails. There was so kind of guided rides that included some of the trails, people you could ask questions to because there was locals who knew the place. So I think for building confidence and connections to feel comfortable to enter an event, that was brilliant, and meet other people who might be interested in doing it. And then another thing, when I live in Aberdeenshire, it was brilliant for just having a really strong community of women who were active in the mountain bike community. And I think some of the things that created that were the Aberdeenshire Trail Association had women's dig days occasionally, which, like, I would never have gone to a dig day before because I found it intimidating because I didn't know how to use the tools. I didn't know what I was doing. But when there was a women's dig day, I felt like, I don't know, just less intimidated, like they could show me what to do. And then from then on, I was happy to go to the mixed dig days because I just had that introduction where I felt a bit more comfortable. So I think things like that. And I know Katie, one of the guides up there, organised like a social ride for International Women's Day, just advertised on social media, which, like, I think again brings more people into the community. And then I think the other thing was just seeing female coaches and guides around at events, like you know, if you have kind of a recce or a coaching day before an enduro, that there are female coaches there, just so you see, I don't know, there's just that representation and potential approachability, or you're like, oh, they're doing it, you can see it. I think that makes a huge difference, because like I trained to be an outdoor instructor, and almost every course I went to, I was the only woman on, you know, online, lots of disciplines, I was the only woman there. And I think, like it mentioned a few times as well, like seeing women in things, like I went to Glenmore Lodge to do a course, and they have pictures of women mountain bikers in their bike workshop, and I really noticed that, because usually it's all men, and that's like a really, I mean, the fact that I noticed it and was like, oh, this is great is you know, it's good to see. So those are the kind of things I thought of that I felt are encouraging to make me want to take part in something. So
excellent, thank you, Kate. Anybody else want to share any thoughts around maybe some changes that they would like to see to help events become more inclusive?
The one thing I obviously we discussed yesterday, Maria, was just having like a gazebo or something up within the pit area, to give anybody who's not done an event, or not so much not done one before, but is rocking up there on their own, doesn't really know much about the bike or how to attack things, but a point where they can go and hang out, pit. If they've got any issues with the bike, there's a mechanic there to help. If they're struggling with a section of a track, there's someone there that can possibly go and help within the practice time, but just give them a base and somewhere to hang out. And also then with all that, you're going to sort of meet other women who are in the same situation, and realize you're not the only one that's like that. And often you find out when you start hanging out and doing things and looking around, they're not as bad as what they think they are. They're actually a lot better, but they're just so nervous. And once they relax and know how to approach, how to turn up, where to go to sign on, where to put the number board on, how to put a transponder on the bike, to go and track walk, to look at lines, how to session a track, how to practice. If there's someone there to show, and then in between all of their practicing and racing, just that base to come back down and to talk about it with people might just help.
Yeah, fantastic idea. Thank you, Lindsay. Okay, well, anyone else? I don't want to cut anyone off if anyone's got any thoughts.
I just want to mention about the toilets. Toilets. So it's definitely something I've seen over the last couple of years, but certainly at the Southern Enduro, he will always put a sign on one toilet saying, you know, female toilet. And I've seen it at some of the Pierce races as well. You know, there'll be a massive bank of, I don't know, 10, and one or two of them will say, you know, women, which is just, I just think it's quite nice to do that, just to, you know, especially somewhere like that where you're there for a weekend, and it doesn't mean men don't use them, but it just is a reminder that there are women at these events, and that, you know, because I think it's really easy when you're in a big sea like that of men to be easily missed and to feel like you're not included. And so to have a sign that says, you know, that there's a toilet here that you can use, that hopefully is not in too much of a state, is a good thing, because that's something that can easily be overlooked, I think, at an event. And you know, if it's certainly got you know, period products in and other things in on the site, you know, that's an extra benefit, isn't it? I just think it's easily missed. And I think some of the race you know, typically most race organisers are men. I'm sure Emily would probably agree. And so they're not always thinking about the things that maybe we might think about coming into an event. And certainly, you know, it was when I was talking to one of the race organisers, and his daughter was then starting to do things, you know, race and stuff. I was explaining about, you know, if you're on your period, you know, that's that's going to happen at some point, that you're going to be on a race. And he was like, oh my God, it's not even something that was on my radar. And, you know, things like that, if you're away for a weekend and you're camping in a van, and, you know, it's just highlighting things that they just don't know. And I don't think it's about pointing fingers or blaming anybody. You know, some of these issues are going to be much bigger than the race organisers themselves. I think it's to recognise that some things are cultural and societal, and it's out of their control. You know, women typically have less money, we have less time, and so for me to want to go to an event, it really has to be like up there. It has to be one, you know, if I'm going to do 1 or 2 races a year, I'm going to cherry pick, and so it's got to be the best of the best. And for me this year it is the Hope Enduro. You know, I think they've made a really good job of it, and it's something that my husband's always commented about actually when we've been to FOD, is that you always see loads of women at FOD. You don't see that in where we live. You don't see it in lots of places you ride, and to think about why that is, and it's the fact that the way that they've structured that entire site, you know, is just way more inclusive for people in general. And it's just amazing. And knowing that site is that inclusive already, to then hold these events at that place, using people like ProRide, using people like Katie Curd, you know, having those people on board where you know that inclusivity is at the heart of their own business, I think is really, really key. And like you were talking about, you know, being value driven, you know, that's that authenticity, it's that connection, it's all of that, isn't it, that certainly is what appeals to me when it comes to an event. But sometimes if you want to make it as a pro rider, you've got to go a certain route, don't you? And you're going to come up against these barriers if that's the route you're going to take. And I think a lot of the time, a lot of the girls just have to get comfortable with that being squashed in an uplift truck, you know. And but I'm definitely one that would sit and call it out. She wouldn't call it out. She'd feel really uncomfortable doing that, being 16. But yeah, I've definitely called out guys for certain terminology in front of them, and I think it's really important. I think it's really, we need to get the men on board as well, because their voice is louder than ours. You know, the number of times I just feel like I sound like an angry woman, you know, all the time. And actually, if you've got a man going, you know, shouting about it, it just comes from a different place, doesn't it? I think it's trying to get them on board with it. And I try and say to people, what if it was your sister, your daughter, your mother, your, you know, your aunt, you all know women, and to try and get them to kind of connect with it, I guess, in that way. And I just think it's really disingenuous when people say, oh, women just aren't competitive and they don't want to race, because that's just total bullshit. I think when you have the right conditions, you can see that it works really, really well. But I think that's not disproportionate to the amount of effort that's gone into those things. And I think that's where it's hard, because it does require, you know, you are going to have to do something. You can't just put your hands up and go, yeah, we're inclusive, we're welcoming women. Well, no, you actually have to do the work. You can't just say it.
Yeah, keep up the calling out, because my mum definitely did that when I was younger to race organisers, and then at races, because I was the same thing, I was too scared to say anything because I was a kid. And now I look back and I'm like, yeah, I'm actually really thankful my mum did that and thought my
she hates it. She hates
no,
it.
I hated it at the time.
It.
I hated it at the time, but like my mum even emailed some race organisers complaining about things that had happened. And yeah, so keep it up, because hopefully she'll look back and like I do and be thankful for it.
But it's also things like British Cycling need to be leading with it, to be saying, right, you know, it's same with the World Cups. You know, you have got teams this year where they've changed the structure for the World Cup, so you've only got 20 women down to 10 and 30 men down to, or is it 60 men down to 20? I don't pay attention to the men's racing as much, but like you've got teams at World Cup level that don't have a woman. It's like how in this day and age can we have a team of 4 men and not have a woman represented? It's just wrong, and that has to come from the brands. It has to come from that background. And yeah, I think it's really interesting when they talk about value and you know, in that social media, because I'm much more inclined to follow the women's racing, and yet the women get less coverage and they get less, you know, they get less practice time. They're always bumped, and I think this is a problem. We're starting at the top with a problem, and we've still got that problem at the bottom, and we kind of need to meet it somewhere in the middle. But British Cycling could certainly do with doing more around it, around their development squads, and holding race organisers to having some sort of quota to at least aim for, to be, you know, because if you don't have something to aim for, you're not going to do anything about it, are you? I don't know.
With British Cycling, they're not really involved with mountain biking. They are with cross country, but with downhill and enduro especially, they're not involved with it at all. So it's down to the event organisers. I think with downhill, they turn up with a couple of commissaires. Since Patton has not been doing the BDS and event organised all of the rounds, it's now individual event organisers put on a round. But British Cycling do take a podium to each one of those and a trailer, whereas before that they didn't even do that.
Yeah, British Cycling, they, with downhill especially, there's nothing and
it's not their category. They don't know it or understand it, so they leave it to the event organisers to sort. And you don't, like, I think it's one of the only cycling sports events where you don't actually have to have a license to race. Like with Pierce, you don't book through, we didn't used to, you don't book through British Cycling to actually get on. So it's not really run by British Cycling. There's obviously that it's governed by them with certain rules, but that's all.
Yeah, but for the nationals, you do have to have a race license from BC.
Yes.
And you
for
have
national,
to be
you do.
You
but
have to be a BC member. You know, so they are getting a decent chunk of money out of people that are entering.
But a lot of other races, like if you're looking at road and cyclocross and things like that, you have to have, even for cross, you can enter, I think, 4 events or so many events under a fun, but you have to have a license. Also, there's restrictions about what you're allowed to wear. In mountain biking, we can wear what we like. We can have branded clothing, but in other races, you can't. It's a lot stricter.
If I may, another question. Do you know if the British Cycling has any program of encouraging women in other disciplines?
Yeah, so in youth, juvenile, junior riders, they have really good programs for especially road races, cyclocross, somewhat cross country. They have really good program, and I only realized how good it was till I started speaking to someone I work with who is a junior road racer coming up, and the amount of support she got from British Cycling for road racing was incredible. And I was sat there and I was like, no, absolutely nothing. They couldn't care less about any others in downhill, because even the men. They just,
if they have a program, then so not even the men.
Okay. Yeah, not even the men.
It's the whole discipline, not women.
Yeah, it's the whole discipline for downhill. They just,
it's not their strong point. They don't know or understand it, so it's left to outside sources to run.
And still you have a lot of really good riders despite this.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much, everyone. It's been a really, really insightful discussion, and I think lots of food for thought, Hetty, for us to take to our follow-up event that we will have in a couple of months' time. So thanks everyone so much for sharing lots of personal stories and experiences as well, and big thanks to Emily and Em as well for coming along and sharing your experiences. Emily, I'm conscious you've got a holiday to pack for, so we'll wrap up. But just to say, if anybody wants to come along to one of our next webinars, we've got one coming up on the 31st of August. And 31st of July is the next one, and that's going to be led by Nick from New Forest Off-Road Club, all about how to tell your story and trying to get more visibility and more kind of women in the media. How to tell your story is what that one's going to be about. And as I said at the beginning, New Forest Off-Road Club are doing absolutely brilliant things in terms of inclusivity. So I'd really recommend that one. It'd be a really good session to come along to. We're also looking at details to be confirmed, but we're looking at putting a webinar on that's looking at mountain biking and menopause as well. But keep an eye on our social media pages for updates on that. But we're looking at potentially 28th of August as a date. But as I say, that's not confirmed just yet. And the other thing that I just wanted to mention is that we wanted to have, for this community of practice, a kind of a platform for people to be able to connect and to kind of support each other and share stories and so on. So we've got a discussion thread set up on the Trail Hub platform. So if you would like to be part of that conversation and part of that thread, drop me an email and we can send you a link to get set up on that. So do just drop me an email if that's of interest to you. But other than that, I'll just actually pop in the chat as well some links to our toolkit framework most of you might have already come across it, but in case you haven't, because we've referenced it quite a few times, so if anybody hasn't come across it yet, and then I'll also put the link there for the next webinar that's going to be run by Nick on telling your story. So all those links are in the chat. And yeah, again, thanks everybody so much for giving up some of your evening. And Emily and Em, big thanks to you. And Emily, enjoy your holiday. And Em, thank you as well for giving up some of your holiday whilst you're away to chat to us. Really appreciate that. So thanks everybody, and have a lovely evening.
Thanks, Maria.
All right, take care,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Take care, bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.